Hello, once again. It's Andrew here from the Revisionist Almanac. At the start of every month, I'll spend some time giving you a window into what I watched over the previous month, both new and old, and share my thoughts on some of those films. Now, before we get into this, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel on whatever podcast platform you're using, as well as rating and reviewing the show. In addition to that, you can also find the show on every major social media platform at the handle Rev Almanac. With that out of the way, let's get into some of my first time and also favorite watches of May. First up is Challengers, currently available on digital and directed by Luca Guadagnino. Now, everything about this movie is a recipe for me to love. It's got sports/tennis, which I'm into, a complex and messy love triangle, three up and coming and tremendous actors, and a director whose past work has all been impressive to me. This movie is an absolute ace. It pulsates with electricity, highlighted by the score from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. We do have to talk about the score first and foremost. It somehow sounds exactly like Reznor Ross, who have crafted so much great music for films like The Social Network and with their band Nine Inch Nails, yet it also feels fresh, different, upbeat, and dark. Don't be surprised if the two of them are on stage at the Academy Awards in early 2025 giving another acceptance speech. The work is indeed that strong. The directing is inventive and playful, though one minor criticism I could serve towards Guadagnino is the way the plot bounces around in time from past to present, which is indeed a little jarring. It's not enough to detract from the forward momentum of the film overall, and it will probably be easier to digest on rewatch. And the centerpiece of the film is the dynamic between the three lead characters, Tashi, Art, and Patrick. Zendaya continues her meteoric rise into the upper echelon of Hollywood superstardom, building on Dune Part 2 earlier this year. This is probably her best work in film, because I'm still partial to the amount of emotion she poured into her Euphoria character on television. Josh O'Connor is exceptional, which is no surprise to anyone that is familiar with his work as Prince Charles on The Crown, but I would direct anyone that wants to see more of O'Connor to 2017's God's Own Country, which is an underrated gem. And the final member of the acting trio is Mike Feist, who I can't believe isn't in more stuff at this point. His on screen presence is searing with heat. He was the best part of Spielberg's West Side Story remake in 2021, and I feel like I've been waiting for him to show up in more things over the last 3 years. Fortunately, though, we get to see him again this summer because he has a role in the upcoming motorcycle film The Bike Riders by Jeff Nichols, which is at the very top of my most anticipated list at the moment. Now, social media is losing their collective minds about a specific shot near the end of the film Challengers, where the camera becomes the tennis ball flying back and forth in the climactic battle between Art and Patrick. But this film is so much bigger than that moment, cool as it may be. I do not think this movie will get a ton of awards recognition because we have so many more months before awards season, and movies in the spring can tend to get lost in the shuffle. But this movie will absolutely find a core audience that will keep it relevant for the foreseeable future. My score for Challengers is an 8.5 out of 10. Up next is Wicked Little Letters, directed by Thea Chirac and currently available on digital. I was skeptical about this movie going in because when I skimmed the synopsis on Letterboxd, it didn't really capture my attention, but I figured I'd give it the benefit of the doubt since it starred Olivia Colman and Jessie Buckley, two of the best actors working today, and I can't say I've ever been disappointed by either of their individual performances. It's the true story of a conservative English town set in the 1920s where a local woman begins receiving extremely provocative and profane letters, and naturally, the town suspects that the rowdy Irish migrant Rose is the culprit. Not everything is as it seems, though, and the women of the town begin an investigation to get to the bottom of the letters. I am happy to report that this was a complete surprise in terms of how much I enjoyed the story and what the film had to say. It was laugh out loud funny, sweet, and also had something to say about political correctness, feminism, and more. Both Coleman as the woman receiving the letters and Buckley as the wild Irish woman suspected of the crime are terrific. My score for Wicked Little Letters is a 7.5 out of 10. We move over to a film called Asphalt City, which is directed by Jean-Stéphane Sauveur, and it's currently available on digital. This movie originally screened at the 2023 Cannes Film Festival, and at the time it was called Black Flies, and it had very mixed reviews. Though it stars Sean Penn, Ty Sheridan, and Michael Pitt, who are all actors I respect, the reviews from Cannes 2023 put this very low on my list to get around to. It's about a young paramedic who gets paired with a more seasoned partner during the night shift in New York City. Together, they deal with the chaos and the challenges that come with the job. While the film is perfectly fine, technically speaking, it was nearly impossible to watch the movie and not yearn for a movie that's very similar and also superior, that being 1999's Bringing Out the Dead, which was directed by Marty Scorsese and starred Nicolas Cage and John Goodman. So if you come across Asphalt City and you're wondering if it's worth your time and attention, just sidestep this one and turn to Bringing Out the Dead instead. I promise you it's a better use of 2 hours of your day. My score for Asphalt City is a 6.1 out of 10. Next up on my review is Rebel Moon Part 2 The Scar Giver, directed by the King of the Bros, Zack Snyder, and currently available to stream exclusively on Netflix. Even though I find the majority of Snyder's work to be overly self indulgent, lacking in depth, and just plain average, I was admittedly intrigued by the idea of what he would have done if he'd been allowed to make a Star Wars film, which is in essence what Rebel Moon is. Part 1 was released last year, was obnoxiously long at 134 minutes, brought nothing new to the science fiction genre, and was something I forgot about almost immediately. Part 2 is honestly even less effective than Part 1, though I guess I'll give it credit for being 10 minutes shorter, though I'm 100% certain every Zack Snyder film could be a lean 90 minutes if he'd just cut out all the fucking slow motion that does literally nothing to add to the story or the aesthetic. I know my review of this won't change the opinion of anyone that enjoys Snyder's work, and that's okay. But I do hope I can convince one or two people that are on the fence about Rebel Moon to just avoid this series entirely and take in the original Star Wars trilogy or any number of better science fiction films that Snyder is just recycling ideas from. And apparently, word is Zack Snyder has even more of this series. God help us all. I'll unfortunately painfully soldier on because I'm a masochist, but in the meantime, I'll pray to whatever gods are out there that Netflix pulls the plug on this and spares me from additional torture. My ultimate review for Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver, is a sad, average, disappointing 5.0 out of 10. Moving to something I enjoyed a little bit more is Abigail, currently available on digital and directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette. Though I avoid trailers in my day to day life, I did catch this trailer at the theater before something I saw earlier in 2024, and I was impressed with what I saw at the time. Once it released, the reviews from a number of horror movie fans that I follow online were very strong, so my hype meter grew a bit more. I made sure to fire this up as soon as I saw it on digital based on the trailer and the positive word of mouth, and I have to say I'm glad I did. The movie's about a bunch of criminals who are put together to watch over a 12-year-old girl and the daughter of a criminal boss for one evening, and if they do, they collect $50 million. Things quickly turn out not to be what they seem, and soon enough, the young girl Abigail reveals her true nature. The movie is bloody, and I mean really bloody. The gore was over the top, and a lot of fun. Fun being the key word because that was my overall takeaway from the entire experience. Is it as good as some of the reviews I saw online hailing it as a modern horror great? I'm not so sure about that, but I did thoroughly enjoy the watch. It also has a terrific ensemble cast, with standouts being Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, and the late Angus Cloud in his final film. If you like horror and blood and guts, this is a movie right up your alley. My score for Abigail is a solid 7.4 out of 10. The next movie I saw in May was Godzilla Minus One, the Academy Award winning film directed by Takashi Yamazaki and available on digital. I am so mad that I'm late to the party on this. I desperately tried to get to it before the Oscars earlier this year, and I could just never make the time to get to it in the theater. Almost every person I know who saw it laid claim to it being one of the 5 to 10 best films of 2023, and it being the unquestioned best Godzilla film since the monster was unleashed on the world in 1954. My God, all those claims couldn't have been more accurate. This movie is incredible. Yes, the visual effects and creature design are borderline perfection, especially given the modest budget, but it's the story at the heart of the film that elevates this to another level. I contend that it's probably best going forward only Japanese filmmakers get access to make Godzilla films, or at the very least, far fewer be made by non Asian directors. Yamazaki fully respects the original 1954 Godzilla, and he puts the attention on the effects World War II and the nuclear bombs dropped on Japan had on an entire population. The film is written, directed, and acted brilliantly, and it's also nice to see Godzilla embraced and represented both as a deity and a monster, because the very nature of the creature is one of complexity. Now that I have seen it, finally, I will be actively seeking out the black and white version that was also released in theaters because I've heard it's equally great. My overall review for Godzilla minus one is an 8.9 out of 10, and it indeed does go into my top 10 movies of last year. The literal next movie I watched after Godzilla minus one was Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire, directed by Adam Wingard and currently available on digital. In hindsight, this may not have been the best choice to watch literally the same day as I saw minus one. I'll put that out there. The two films could not be more opposite of each other in look, in depth, and unfortunately in quality. The movie's dumb. It's really, really dumb. But I have to also admit, I watched this with my two young boys who are big into the recent Godzilla and King Kong films, and seeing them have a blast does play a biased role in my overall experience with anything at this point. You can check your brain at the door for Godzilla and Kong, because if you even spend 1 minute thinking about plot, logic, or anything other than big ass monsters punching each other in the face, you're going to walk away disappointed. I can really only recommend this to someone who has kids and wants them to get into monster movies with some guardrails, because it's safe enough to keep them from having nightmares or be overly traumatized afterwards. My review for Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire is a soft 6.1 out of 10. Next up is The Idea of You, directed by Michael Showalter and available to stream right now on Prime Video. I haven't been that enamored with most of what Prime Video has made recently, specifically in the rom-com genre. I didn't have much hope for this movie based on the description and the poster, but I tried to come in fairly because Anne Hathaway is a wonderful actress. It's about a 40-year-old woman who falls for a 24-year-old that happens to be the lead singer of a boy band called August Moon, clearly modeled after someone like Harry Styles and One Direction. Now, I'm not here to be prude about an age gap in a romantic movie, especially when both characters are fully grown adults. God knows we have seen more than our fair share of movies with the genders swapped and older men with younger women. I just didn't find the movie itself or the chemistry between Anne Hathaway and the pop singer, played by Nicholas Galitzine, to be particularly strong. I don't think Prime or anyone involved with this movie will be worried about my finding it lacking, because its target audience clearly isn't someone who looks like me, a middle aged white male. And I have seen a number of friends on social media are having better experiences with The Idea of You. If you love all things rom com, this is a pretty safe recommendation. My score, unfortunately, for the film is a 5.4 out of 10. We now get to The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, the latest Guy Ritchie film, which is currently available on digital. I have to state for the record, I had a kid free evening when I watched this movie, and I was in the right state of mind, so to speak, which might have an impact on the final score. Now, I am a Guy Ritchie fan. Snatch, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, his Sherlock films with Robert Downey Jr., and 2019's The Gentleman are movies I think feature the best of his style and his point of view. On the flip side, though, I really disliked his live action Aladdin film with Will Smith and also his King Arthur movie from 2017 that starred Charlie Hunnam and Jude Law. Would this movie, that is a true story about the British secret operatives helping to turn the tide of World War II, be something that meshed with Ritchie's style? For me, at least, the answer is a resounding yes. It stars Henry Cavill as Gus March Phillips, the real life person that Ian Fleming based James Bond on, and in a weird turn of events, somehow gave us Henry Cavill as Bond, a casting decision the internet has been trying to make happen for years. The movie also has the handsome and bulky Alan Ritchson of Reacher fame, as well as Henry Golding, another actor who just happens to always be getting fan cast as a future 007. I think Guy Ritchie tells the story with energy, solid action, and doesn't let the movie get too bloated, clocking in at a comfortable 2 hours even. I would think this is a movie that'll be appreciated by people into world history, into Guy Ritchie's past work, or at least just people who want to stare at Henry Cavill, Alan Ritchson, and Henry Golding and swoon for a couple of hours. My score for the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare is a good 7.2 out of 10. The next May watch for me was Stop Making Sense, the 1984 concert film directed by Jonathan Demme and currently available on Max. Now, normally on these monthly recaps, I wouldn't feature a 40-year-old film, but this one is a special circumstance. The legendary concert film featuring Talking Heads was re released in 2023 in a stunning new 4K restoration and distributed by A24. I did everything I could to try to see this in theaters last year, but I ultimately wasn't able to get to it before it had its run. Now, I already had the film ranked very highly among all concert films I've ever seen, thanks to the way it captures the unique and genius qualities of David Byrne and company at the height of their 1980s popularity. The 4K restoration has just bumped the movie up ever so slightly, though, and I can now safely and comfortably say this is absolute perfection. The crispness of the camera, the way it enhances the overall sound quality for the band's 16-song set list, to now the ease with which people can find and enjoy this piece of art, it's as good as it gets. Whether you like Talking Heads casually, obsessively, or perhaps aren't familiar with them at all, I would recommend at least turning this on for 20 or 30 minutes and giving it your full attention. I expect anyone that does give it a watch will be sucked into the experience and probably have the best chunk of that day be the 88 minutes this film runs. So thank you, A24, for getting this distributed. Thank you, Max, for making this so easy to find now. And thank you, Talking Heads, for creating music that has stood the test of time. My score for Stop Making Sense is a perfect 10 out of 10. We switch gears a little bit and go to Love Lies Bleeding, directed by Rose Glass and currently available on digital. Now, leading up to this film being released, I was very intrigued by the film, based solely on the poster, what little I knew about the plot, and because it stars Kristen Stewart, who is a fearless actor with the choices she's been making. And while I respect the directorial debut of Rose Glass, 2019's Saint Maud, I wasn't as high on that movie as a lot of people were. I have seen it 3 or 4 times and I just can't find a way into it, though I do find it objectively well made. Love Lies Bleeding is a massive step up, though, for Rose Glass. She has arrived and kicked down the door so she can step into the room of the best young directors that have my undivided attention going forward. I also have to take back a previous statement I made for Drive Away Dolls earlier this year, where I said that was the horniest movie of the year. Love Lies yanked that distinction and then ran with it because this movie is hot, it's sweaty, and it's just plain cool. The movie follows a gym owner, Lou, played by Kristen Stewart, who starts a relationship with a female bodybuilder, Jackie, played by Katie O'Brien, only for their ambitions as a couple and in life to be compromised by Lou's criminal family, led by Lou's senior, diabolically played by the great Ed Harris, who chews up scenery and enters the pantheon of the best on screen mullets I can remember. The movie is surreal, it's violent, it's ferociously feminist, it's lesbian empowered, and it's one of the most visceral watches of the last few years. At times, it feels like it has a dark edge reminiscent of the Coen brothers' Blood Simple, yet it also creates something of its own that will itself become an inspiration for future filmmakers. The movie transports you to the 1980s with the costumes, the set design, and the music. It features solid supporting roles by a creepy as hell Dave Franco and an always reliable Jenna Malone. Give in to this film and accept your fate as another disciple of Rose Glass. She's going to take over the world if this movie is any indication. My score for Love Lies Bleeding is a very strong 8.4 out of 10. The next movie I saw was Sasquatch Sunset, directed by the Zellner brothers and currently available on digital. This movie featured on my list of the most anticipated movies of quarter two when I did a special episode back in April, mainly because this featured at Sundance in January. A few of the reviews were very strong at the time, and the idea of a movie about a family of Sasquatch seemed at the very least different. Now, after watching this movie, I'm not totally sure how I even go about reviewing this thing. It'll take something monumental to top this as the biggest what the fuck did I just watch movie of 2024. The film is a complete silent film in that there are no talking Sasquatch or anything like that. It's shot like a nature documentary, but it follows the day to day lives of a family of Squatch. Along their way, they hump, they defecate, they battle nature, and I guess they try and figure out what their place is in a world of increased colonization. I'm going to give the movie points for originality because I've seen literally nothing like this over my nearly 40 years on Earth, but for entertainment value, I have no fucking clue who this movie was made for. Jesse Eisenberg plays one of the Sasquatch, and for those of you that might not be a fan of his acting, I suppose you'll enjoy this one because at least you don't actually have to see him or hear him talk under the pounds of suit and prosthetics. This is going to be a movie that appeals to the smallest of niche audiences who will sing its praise, though they will just be howling into the vastness of social media nothingness like the forest lands these Sasquatch live in. For sheer creativity, I will score Sasquatch Sunset a 6.4 out of 10. Let's now transition to the worst movie I saw this month and the biggest pile of shit I have seen through 5 months of the year. That would be Unfrosted, available on Netflix, written, directed, and starring Jerry Seinfeld. Oh, Jerry, 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 what are you doing with your legacy, attaching your name in so many places to this disaster? Netflix should have checked the expiration date on this script before they signed a giant check for $70 million to bankroll the story of the invention of the Pop Tart. And trust me, it's way worse than it even sounds. I guess I can maybe thank Seinfeld, though, because I've rallied against how tired I am of this subgenre about the origin of every product known to man. And Unfrosted is so putrid that its stench might just waft over to other studios and distributors and compel them to throw any other product origin movies into the garbage. I mean, seriously, Netflix, Seinfeld has more than enough money in his bankroll. If any exec at the streamer is listening and wants to light $70 million on fire, just call me up and I'm 100% certain I could come up with something twice as interesting at half the cost. I really don't have the slightest idea what this movie's going for or who it's trying to appeal to comedically. It's so sterile, tired, lazy, bland, and maybe some frosting might have actually helped on this one. A little sugar, a little edge, a little something. You could telegraph the quote unquote jokes, and I use that term very loosely, a mile away. I don't think I laughed once for 93 of the most painful minutes of the year, and I debated early on if I should continue watching it and putting myself through that agony. But I powered on so I could deliver this review to you and hopefully steer one unknowing viewer away from the dumpster fire that is Unfrosted. And on another note, during the press tour, Seinfeld tried, I guess, rallying the conservative side of the populace by attacking wokeness and political correctness and saying those types of things in big corporations are the death of comedy. Look in the fucking mirror, dude. This movie is the death of comedy. I have never once looked at Jerry Seinfeld and thought, yeah, that's the guy who should be gatekeeping what's edgy or pushing the envelope. Leave it to the guy who actually wrote your damn show you made all your money off of, Larry David, or Bill Burr, or the It's Always Sunny crew, or a host of other people who actually can make material in 2024 that does push the line and is funny. This movie is not satire. It's not comedy. It's nothingness. It's less than nothing. It makes Flaming Hot look like a Best Picture winner. Side note, I thought Flaming Hot was at least fun and funny. Run. Run far away from ever thinking about clicking play on this movie that's heavy on preservatives and light on anything healthy or tasty. It sucks, and I wouldn't feed it to my dog. My score for Unfrosted is a painful terrible, dreadful 1.8 out of 10. Let's please end on a positive note. We'll get to my final review, which is Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, directed by George Miller and currently available to see in theaters. Now, for anyone who didn't listen to my 3-part series where I counted down my top 50 favorite action movies, which you should check out after listening to this, Mad Max Fury Road is an all time great movie and theater experience in my life. So the bar was set very highly for George Miller as he returned to the wasteland. Now, I went to see this movie on Memorial Day with my best friend, and we made sure to see it in the largest format possible to get the maximum out of the experience. It was disappointing, though, that we were in a massive theater with almost nobody else. Something sad to see how few went out to see this prequel over the holiday. Though I do think the online discourse over this movie bombing is a bit reactionary. Fury Road was by no means a box office Goliath, and it found its legs once it hit DVD and streaming, and it picked up continuous momentum over the period of a decade. Furiosa is also a prequel with a different actress playing the lead role, and it expands upon a strange and fascinating world that casual fans probably didn't care about. The best comparison I can make to Furiosa's struggles in theaters, but will almost certainly be a late renaissance in a year or two, is Blade Runner 2049, which people look back on 7 years later as a masterpiece, but it also had an impossible time getting butts into seats in the theater. And let's be clear, my opinion of this movie has absolutely nothing to do with the box office gross. In fact, no movie experience I ever have is in any way, shape, or form related to what the population at large feels. I like what I like, and I don't like what I don't like, independent of outside factors. And yes, I had a hell of a great time with Furiosa. It was big, it was bombastic, it was epic, and as someone who has had a blast with anything Mad Max related, from the previous 4 films to the 2015 video game, which is now directly tied into the canon of the universe, this movie was basically made for me. Now, I know I will be higher on this movie than most people, so please take my score with a grain of salt. There were some uneven moments here and there, and it was probably longer than it needed to be, at least if your expectations were another balls to the wall action movie like Fury Road. I, however, went into the film expecting it to be more methodical, so I didn't find the structure and the pacing problematic. I was a bit surprised it took a solid hour until we saw Anya Taylor-Joy on screen as Furiosa, but the younger actress playing the lead character, Alila Brown, was no slouch. In a way, much like Fury Road was a Mad Max movie that was really the story of Furiosa, this movie was kind of built around Chris Hemsworth's villainous Dementis character, and I thought that was an interesting but ultimately successful choice. I'm here for whatever this next era of Hemsworth's career is post Thor. He's on record saying he felt things went a little off the rails with the amount of comedy he and Taika Waititi brought to Thor Love and Thunder, and he's accurate in that. But that shouldn't cloud the fact that Hemsworth himself has impeccable comedic chops. He goes all in with Dementis, giving us a character that has clear ambitions and motivations, with his own sordid and heartbreaking backstory, but with a charisma and a tendency for ultra violence that is perfectly suited to go toe to toe with Furiosa's character and help her get from this point in the story to what we already know comes in Fury Road. Whether this is the end of the line for George Miller making Mad Max movies, or possibly the end of his career in general since he's in his 80s at this point, I just want to celebrate his career and the unparalleled ambition and singular vision he brought to the 5 films in the Mad Max universe over the course of 45 years. He's a legend. He's an icon, and he's one of the most innovative action storytellers the world has ever seen. I salute you, sir. My score for Furiosa is a great 9 out of 10. So, do you agree with any of my reviews, or do you think I'm way out of line with some of the scores? Feel free to DM me on any of the social media pages at RevAlmanac or email the show at revisionistalmanac@yahoo.com and leave me your thoughts. And at the time of this recording on June 1st, a new episode of our regular monthly revised Oscars is only a few days away. I was joined by Tom Duncan from the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, and we look back on the 2005 year in film and the Academy Awards ceremonies that include Crash winning Best Picture. Did Tom and I agree with any of the wins that year, including Ang Lee taking Best Director for Brokeback Mountain, Reese Witherspoon singing her way into Best Actress for Walk the Line, or Philip Seymour Hoffman winning Best Actor for his transformation as Truman Capote. You're just going to have to tune into that episode and find out for yourself. And don't forget, while we make our choices for revised Oscars winners, what goes into the revisionist almanac is ultimately up to you, the listener. Every revised category winner, made by Tom and myself, will go head to head with the actual winners that year. And what you vote for the most across Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Threads gets the distinction of being called the revised winner. So make sure you're following the show on every platform, because the more places you follow, the more places you can vote. This wraps up everything I watched in May. I hope you had some fun listening, and be on the lookout for more of this series at the start of each new month. I will see you next time.